Welcome back to the channel. If you missed part 1, we drove all the way to the North Cape, the furthest point you can reach by road in Europe, and we slept in a small harbour town called Honningsvåg. That is exactly where we are starting today. Over the next 4 days we are going to cross the border, drive along one of the longest bridges in Norway, and this part with something I had to book weeks in advance because it was literally the last available slot of the entire season. So let's get into it. Honningsvåg is officially the northernmost city in Norway, which is a funny title because it only has around 2,200 inhabitants. It got city status in 1998, and for a long time it was actually disputed whether this place counted as a city at all. What it absolutely is, though, is the main gateway harbour for everyone going up to the North Cape. Almost every cruise ship that wants to reach the top of Europe stops here first. The weather that morning was doing all of it at the same time. Sunshine, rain, and the wind that felt personal. But then, this enormous rainbow appeared straight over the water, with mountains sitting in the background, and suddenly the cold didn't matter anymore. Nobody warned me up about this place. It doesn't show up in the big travel guides. I found it on Google Maps while eating breakfast. Kirkeporten. The trailhead starts in Karasjok, which claims to be the northernmost fishing village in the entire world. Tiny place, half of it sits against the hill and half of it sits against the water. And the whole thing feels like the end of something. The hike itself is short, maybe 1.5 hours return. But further up we walked, the more aggressive the wind got, and I mean aggressive. Just before the summit we generally stopped and had a conversation about whether to turn back. Not because it was dangerous in terms of the terrain, the ground was fine, not steep, not slippery, but because we could barely stay on our feet. But we pushed through, and the moment we reached the top, the landscape that opened up in front of us was unreal. Raw, tectonic, almost prehistoric. You can literally read the geology of the place of the rocks. And then the reason we came, Kirkeporten itself, which translates to the church gate. It is a natural stone arch carved into the cliffs, framing the Arctic Ocean like a window at the end of the world. We didn't stay long up there. The wind won that argument, but sitting back in the car afterwards, slowly warming up with something to eat, I remember thinking this was already one of the best tours of the entire trip, and we only just started today. So, if you are ever driving up to the North Cape, don't skip this one. Put Kirkeporten into your map and thank me later. We had to go back through the North Cape Tunnel, which by itself is an engineering story. It is almost 7 kilometers long, goes more than 200 meters below sea level, and connects the island of Aurora to the mainland. Before it opened in 1999, the only way to get to the North Cape was by ferry. But getting there took us a while, because we kept stopping. Sometimes because the panorama was simply too ridiculous to drive past, sometimes for a beach glowing in a sunbeam, sometimes for reindeer again. Not far from the tunnel we found another waterfall, and opposite the road there was this rock formation that honestly looked fake. Imagine taking thousands of sheets of paper, stacking them, and then covering the top with a neat layer of grass. That is exactly what it looked like, except in stone. A bit further on we hit Skarpbergfossen. This one is impossible to miss because it drops right next to the parking area, second before the tunnel entrance. The fall itself is massive, the surrounding area wild, and the stops cost you nothing except 5 minutes. Then came the Karasjok Bridge. If you drive to or from the North Cape, you will cross this bridge. There is no way around it. When it opened in 1977, it was the longest suspension bridge in Northern Europe, at 741 meters. Seeing it from below, while seagulls were going completely crazy over the water, was one of those moments where you just stop the car and watch. This town has a club, and some of the most famous people on the planet are members of it. Hammerfest. Around 10,000 inhabitants sitting in the 70th parallels, which makes it one of the northernmost towns in the world. And here is something people don't know. Hammerfest was the first town in Northern Europe to have electric street lighting. That was in 1891, almost before most of Europe had figured out what electricity was. Right next to our hotel was something called the Stube Geodetic Arc. It looks like a simple sculpture in the viewpoint, but this thing is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Stube Arc is a chain of survey points stretching from Hammerfest all the way down to the Black Sea. More than 2,800 kilometers long. Back in the 1800s, a scientist called Friedrich Georg Wilhelm Struve used it to measure the exact shape and size of our planet. This little sculpture in Hammerfest is the northernmost point of that chain. The whole thing is basically the first real scientific measurement of the Earth. Above Hammerfest there is a high viewpoint called Salen. You can drive up in a few minutes. The view over the harbor, the town and the surrounding fjords is one of the best city viewpoints I've ever shot. If you visit, go up there, not optional. But the real reason Hammerfest is famous is this: the Royal and Ancient Polar Bear Society, founded in 1963. Members include royals, explorers, celebrities and, well, regular humans. For a one-time fee of under €100, and if you can prove you are physically here in Hammerfest, you can become a lifetime member. You get a diploma, a pin and an invitation to the annual meeting. I have decided I am going to officially join. The moment this channel hits social media stardom, I'm filling the paperwork. So if you want to witness that moment, do me a favor and hit subscribe. We finished the day walking around the harbor past the town hall that is guarded by the coolest security in the country, 2 polar bear statues, and we were watched the whole time by a couple of suspicious looking dogs. Welcome to Hammerfest. We made a long stop in Karasjok, which is actually still on the Norwegian side, to visit the Sami museum called Museet. The Sami are the indigenous people of Sapmi, which covers parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland and Russia. Today there are somewhere between 80 and 100,000 Sami in total, and they are officially recognized as Europe's only indigenous people. The museum has 2 parts: the classic indoor museum, full of artifacts, traditional clothing and history, and the opener section, where you walk between reconstructed Sami homes and see how people lived for centuries. Entry is only a few euros and it's absolutely worth it. Our guide told us something I keep thinking about. Some Sami families still live today in 2026 in a way that is very close to what we were looking at in the open air section. Deeply connected to the land, very little contact with technology, moving with the reindeer herds. There are obvious trade-offs to that kind of life in the modern world, but watching it, I could understand why people still choose it. I want to show you the most beautiful forest I've ever driven through, but I'm not allowed to. On day 6, we crossed the Norwegian-Finnish border, and our plan was drive south along the eastern edge of Finnish Lapland, basically hugging the Russian border the whole way down. Beautiful on the map, slightly unsettling in real life. Because shortly after we crossed, we saw something we had never seen before on this trip. A sign, and then another and another. Military zone. No photos, no videos, under any circumstances. It was honestly a little creepy. You are driving through complete wilderness, lakes, pine forest, absolute silence, and then every now and then you notice an antenna sticking out of the trees or a fence that doesn't belong there. I cannot show you this region, but I can tell you how it looked like. Mirror-fed lakes with no wind on them, forests so dense that the daylight barely reached the road, and kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. If you ever drive that route, respect the sign. This is not a tourist territory. This is a national border in the middle of nowhere, and the rules exist for a reason. Our hotel for the night was near Inari, and before sunset we took a short walk in the forest next to it. Like almost everywhere in Finland, there was a public fire pit. Finns love to grill in the forest. It's basically a national sport. The forest had a fast-flowing river running through it. Our hotel owner told us that at certain times of year, this exact stretch of river is a famous bear watching spot. Bears come here to fish from the rock. Most Finnish bears live close to the Russian border and are active between early April and early October. We didn't see one of that evening, but knowing they were out there, somewhere in those trees, definitely changed the walk. Finland has 188,000 lakes. This is the one you need to see. Lake Inari is the third largest lake in Finland, covering over 1,040 square kilometers, and it has more than 3,000 islands. It sits deep inside Sami territory, and it is considered as a sacred lake, traditional Sami belief. There is one island called Unsari that was used as an ancient Sami sacrificial site for centuries. We went straight after breakfast, and I've seen a lot of lakes. I live in Switzerland, we have a few. But Inari that morning was on another level. The water was not just calm, it was a mirror. Not a ripple, not a breath of wind. Clouds reflecting so cleanly into the surface that the horizon basically disappeared. It is one of the most beautiful landscapes we saw in all of Finland. And it is the kind of view that you cannot really capture with a camera, no matter how expensive the gear. You just stand there and look. If you ever drive through northern Finland, do not treat Inari as a viewpoint on the way to somewhere else. Stop. Spend the morning here. That is the move. Driving further south, we saw more reindeer. By this point in the trip, seeing reindeer was no longer a surprise, it was a daily routine. At the beginning, we were stopped for every single one. Now we were just slowing down and waving. Fun fact, there are around 200,000 reindeer in Finnish Lapland. That is more reindeer than people in this region. And almost all of them are semi-domesticated, owned by Sami herders, but they roam completely freely. We stopped at a random cafe we found on Google Map called Cafe Peurasuvanto. Incredibly friendly service, fantastic cake, but honestly the location is what I remember most. A small lake in the middle of the forest, and for once we actually saw waterbirds here, which had been surprisingly rare on the whole trip. On the drive toward Kemijärvi, we experienced our first traffic jam of the entire trip, caused by a reindeer family deciding to cross the road with all the urgency of a sunbathing cat. It was impossible to be annoyed, it was genuinely hilarious. I set an alarm for midnight. What we saw was the strongest aurora of the entire trip. We spontaneously booked a place in Kemijärvi, which is a small town in the middle of Finnish Lapland. After dinner, we went straight to bed, but the alarm was set for midnight. Forecast was saying high aurora activity, and for the first time on this trip, we were in a location with almost no light pollution, right next to a dark lake. At midnight, we walked down about 150 meters from the cabin, and for a few seconds, we just stood there. This was not the first time we had seen northern lights on the trip, but it was the first time they were so strong that we didn't need a camera to see them. With the naked eye, the whole sky was moving, green, violent, moving like a curtain in slow motion across the stars. Quick fact about the northern lights. What you are actually seeing are solar particles from the sun slamming into Earth's atmosphere at about 45 million miles per hour. The green color is oxygen, being hit around 100 to 300 kilometers altitude. The rarer red and purple come from even higher. You are basically watching our planet's magnetic field defending itself in real life. We stayed out there for over 2 hours, freezing, not speaking much, just watching. And then we woke back, fell asleep, and woke up wondering if we had dreamed the whole thing. If you have northern lights on your bucket list, and you should, do not just go to Iceland. Come to Finnish Lapland. Come in late September, early October. Stay somewhere with those street lights and set alarm because they don't want to wait for you. Day 8 was different from the start because for the first time on this trip we had something to book. One specific reservation that we had to make weeks in advance. And we got incredibly lucky because the day we were there, the 28th of September, was literally the last day of the entire year that this particular experience was being offered. But first, the drive. Right outside Kemijärvi, we had to stop because the natural conditions that morning were something I've never seen before. The fog was sitting low over the lake, rising just enough that you could see the town of Kemijärvi sitting perfectly inside this horizontal line between water below and fog above. Pure cinema. Further south, we stopped on an Arctic Circle sculpture, which marks the exact latitude where the sun doesn't set on the summer solstice and doesn't rise on the winter solstice. That latitude is 66 degrees and 33 minutes north. What made this stop more interesting that the sculpture itself was the river next to it, where a fisherman was quietly getting his lunch. Since we still had time, we decided to walk part of the Little Bears ring route. It is a 12-kilometer loop through Oulanka National Park, and the name is not decoration. This is one of the core bear habitats of all Finland. Some trails in this park lead directly past the most frequented bear routes and past known their location. Signs everywhere warn you, during certain season, especially when cubs are newborn, stay off these paths. Bear mothers are extremely protective. The bears themselves are not aggressive by default, but a mother will attack instantly if she identifies a threat to her cubs. We walked the small loop, and late September is statistically the lowest risk time because bears are already preparing to hibernate. But I will admit, the entire time we were in those trees, I couldn't shake that feeling that someone was watching us. The trail itself is stunning. Rivers, wooden bridges, forest lakes, and there is a famous spot along the way, a grill place and an emergency shelter hut right next to the river with intense current. One of the most beautiful trail stops I've ever photographed. No wonder this one is one of the most popular hiking routes in southern Lapland. I was 3 meters from a wild brown bear, separated only by a thin piece of wood. Our guide had sent us coordinates. That was it. Drive here, park, wait. The coordinates were deep in the forest, extremely close to the Russian border, with nothing around us except trees. We felt completely alone. We sat in the car, nobody dared to get out. Then another car arrived, then another, finally our guide. Only then did everyone climb out. It was almost funny how obvious it was that nobody wanted to be the first human standing on the road. Our guide is a forester and a beer specialist. He has been running these tours for more than 40 years. So my first question was the obvious one. If a bear approaches the observation hut, how exactly are you going to protect us? Because I don't see any bear spray or something similar on you. His answer was, they will not do anything, you are not prey. I wasn't fully reassured by this answer. The observation hut was about 500 meters from the meeting point, deep in the forest. On the way there, we saw bear droppings everywhere. That was the moment it hit me. This is not a zoo. These are real animals and they are definitely here. The hut itself is tiny, painted forest green. The walls are thin wooden panels. Let me put it this way. If a bear wanted to come in, it would take about 1 minute. In the walls, small holes for the camera lenses, small windows for watching. And then, just meters in front of us, a massive brown bear. Our guide estimated around 400 kilograms. For scale, a fully grown European brown bear can weigh between 150 and 350 kilograms on average. This one was at the top of the scale, a monster, and absolutely calm. Here is how it works, and I wanted to be honest about this. In the meadow in front of the hut, small amounts of food are placed at regular intervals during the season. It's not a feeding for entertainment. It is a supplementary food source that helps bears build up the fat reserves they need for hibernation. Not every bear manages to eat enough on its own before winter, and these stations save lives. Our tour was the final tour of the year. After us, no more food, which also tells the bears in a very direct way, season over, go sleep. Breaking that rhythm would be dangerous for the animals. Another important fact. Across Finland, there are 95 registered bear observation sites. Only 2 of them are open to tourists. The rest are kept completely private to protect the animals. That ratio tells you how seriously this country takes bears' welfare. We had 3 bears at our site, present for almost full 2 hours. 2 more came briefly and left. Watching an animal like that in complete silence from a few meters away, in its own territory, not in a cage, not in a zoo, is a feeling I genuinely cannot describe. It's not fear, it's not excitement, it's respect. I never expected this trip to deliver so much. The most intense landscape I've ever seen in Norway, crossing back into Finland, the strongest northern lights of our lives, and finishing with a face-to-face meeting with one of the largest predators in Europe. This part of Europe is widely underrated. I say this constantly on this channel, but Lapland proves it again. You don't need to fly the other side of the world for adventures like this. If you enjoyed this one, do me a favor. Drop a comment telling me which of these 4 days would be your number one. Kirkeporten, Hammerfest, Inari, or the Bears. I'm genuinely curious. Hit subscribe because the next video is going to be even bigger. We are staying in the craziest accommodation on the entire trip. We are meeting countless reindeer, we are visiting Santa himself, we are going to a wild park to meet wolves, and before heading home we are exploring the city of Oulu. Thank you for watching, see you in the next one. Peace.